counted as well. Here with me on set is Democratic Congresswoman of Illinois, Sherry Bustos. She just announced that she is running to be the chair of the DPCC. Congresswoman, it's great to see you. I read what happened on election night as something of a vindication of the strategy that you had been pushing Democrats toward all the way along, kind of this idea that if they were going to win back the House and ultimately if you guys have a shot at taking back the White House in 2020, the path runs straight through the Midwest, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, and of course areas in your state of Illinois. What did you learn from what happened, and what do you think that Democrats should take note of and try to make sure they don't forget as we approach this presidential race?
Well, I do think the path to the majority did indeed go through the heartland, but it also went right through our gender. Look, we have a record number of women who will be serving in the Congress. We needed to pick up 23 seats to win back the majority. You know how many women flipped? 23 went from red to blue.
23 went from red to blue.
Yes.
It was all
so
women.
without the women, just want to note that. What did we learn? Have great candidates that fit their district. Politically, people who are running, who can relate to folks at home, work hard, make sure you have the resources to get your messaging out, and show up. Everybody, I'm almost feeling like this feels cliche anymore, but listening really does matter, and I think we are going to have the greatest freshman class as soon as they're sworn in on January 3rd. It's going to be unbelievable.
You know, I was watching one of your new members on Meet the Press this morning. Chuck Todd had a very nice roundtable with two of these new women members, and he asked them, of course, about Nancy Pelosi. And one of them answered exactly what you just said. She said, listen, I've been listening to my constituents, and they are telling me that they want a new generation of leadership. How do you square that?
Well, I think we will have a new generation of leadership. It might not be all the way up to the top. I don't know what's going to end up happening with that. There's a lot of questions yet to be answered. Who all is going to run? It might just be Nancy Pelosi who is running for Speaker. Nobody else challenges her. But we've got Hakeem Jeffries, who is running for caucus chair against Barbara Lee. So two members of the Congressional Black
Someone
Caucus.
seen as a potential speaker in waiting on the line.
Yep. We have Ben Ray Lujan, who just spent the last 4 years of his life working very, very hard to help us win back the majority. A member of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus running for one of the top positions. We've got, I don't know if I'm necessarily considered the younger generation, but I am running in one of the top leadership positions. Well, thank you for saying that.
Let's talk about Florida and Georgia for a second, and specifically voter suppression and sort of concerns. This signature matching seems to have come up as something that is now a major issue. How is this going to play out ultimately in these places, and what role do the courts have? And I mean, we talked about this earlier in the show, but Republicans have in some of these states really cast what's going on as illegitimate.
Right. So I think Florida and Georgia are two very different states with two very different issues. So in Georgia, I think there was clear voter suppression over the years committed by Brian Kemp. And so I think people are right to pursue a recount. I'm not sure that Stacey Abrams is going to be victorious there. Her window for a recount is narrowing, as we see. In Florida, I think it was something different. I think Ron DeSantis ran a campaign where he was very clear on where he stood. I actually do think, you saw that Gillum was so far ahead in the polls. I actually do think there were a significant amount of Florida voters who may have said to a pollster, I like this Gillum guy, but quietly did believe some of the things that DeSantis was saying and echoed that, and that showed up in the ballots. I do think that both these states have to have a recount. I think it would be really challenging for Republicans to justify not having every vote counted. And again, like we talked about in the last segment, that the fact that people have come out and said that ballots can't be counted or that ballots come in after the deadline should be dismissed. I think that's why, when you look at this from the macro, Democrats are really successful, like you said. When you look at it from the micro, there are a lot of people who are emotionally connected to these races. People were emotionally connected to Gillum and Beto and Abrams. And so they feel a little bit disheartened by this, despite Democrats picking up so many gains. So I think to maintain the integrity of the election process, Republicans would be wise to say, obviously, we want to have every vote counted. DeSantis should be confident and say, yeah, I don't have anything to fear. Count every vote. Same with Kemp. So we'll see what happens. I
want to show Rick Scott, who outgoing governor of Florida, running against Bill Nelson, and made some pretty personal accusations. If we have that sound, I'd like to play it. And then, AB, I'm interested to hear you weigh in.
We know Senator Nelson's lawyer said that a non-citizen should have the right to vote. Senator Nelson has gone to court to say that fraudulent ballots that were not properly delivered, signed, whatever, should be counted. Okay, Senator Nelson is clearly trying to commit fraud to try to win this election. That's all this is.
And you think that is the senator himself is committing fraud?
Well, it's his team.
A.B. Stoddard, is any of that true?
No, Rick Scott is the governor of Florida, and there are a lot of questions about the leadership supervisors in Broward County and Palm Beach. Brenda Snipes in Broward County has had a rough history, which has caused people to be skeptical. I have a question for the governor, which is why did you not replace her before this election? So there's sort of this last-minute effort to make it the Democrats' fault because they're asking for a recount, where there are real problems and real distrust has been mounting that's nonpartisan over the processes that are in place in Florida. It is the job of President Trump and the job of Rick Scott, who is the governor of the Sunshine State, to maintain whatever trust citizens have left in these systems and fix the problems that they have. After elections, no one put any money into these systems. They never want to make it better. But at the time, they want to name and shame people and flip out. They can have Rudy Giuliani be a pit bull on Twitter. They can have people go like Congressman Matt Gaetz and run around and be reckless with his rhetoric. But it is really profound to see someone, the governor of Florida and the president of the United States, insinuating that there is fraud going on in Arizona as well as Florida, and that it's Senator Nelson's fault and he wants illegal votes to count. This kind of thing, when we have such a fragile level of trust anyway in our system, is so destructive, and I don't see enough people calling it out.
Can we talk about the president on this for a second? Because he's obviously tweeted about some of these and suggested that the actual outcome of the election is not, that we can't trust it. I mean, what's behind that, and does it do lasting damage, as A.B. was suggesting?
Well, I think you can look back at his history. In 2016, he said before he was elected that he called the whole system into question and suggested that the election might be rigged if it were Hillary Clinton who were the victor. Now, he let that rhetoric sort of drop after he won, but that is clearly something that he's willing to say. He did then on an election as consequential as the presidential one, and he's done the same now. And that, that kind of part of his war chest, I guess, part of his vocabulary when it comes down to an election where he's not seeing a result that he wants to see.
Congresswoman, before we wrap up here, I want to ask you about your bid to chair the DPCC. Potentially going to be a tougher road, so a challenging job to take on. Where would you looking into the next cycle, and why should your colleagues pick you for that job?
We will have at minimum 30 members of the Democratic caucus and as many as 33 who will be serving from Trump districts. I'm one of those. And I won by the largest margin of any Democrat on Tuesday. I won by a 24-point margin in a Trump district. I defeated a Republican to get here. I've increased my margin of victory every cycle. I know what it takes to not just win in a very tough district, but how to hang on to it. I know how to raise the resources we need to be successful. And I was a journalist like you for almost 2 decades and worked in communications for another 10 years and just ended up being a co-chair of the Policy and Communications Committee. So hopefully I know how to communicate as well. And that probably should have been shorter if I was really good at it. So
it's okay. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here. We want to say happy birthday to your sister, Lynn, who I know watches the show sometimes. Lynn, very happy birthday to you on this Veterans Day. Congresswoman Sherry Bustos, Jeff Mason.